Welcome to the Abundant Soul Podcast. Today, Ashley and I have the pleasure to discuss with Diana Fjer, a sacred love and embodiment coach who helps women heal relationship anxiety, release emotional patterns, and reclaim their inner power. After overcoming deep-rooted trauma and transforming her own life, she now blends science-backed healing techniques such as somatic experiencing, inner child work, and nervous system regulation with intuitive energy work to guide others on their journey to emotional security, self-worth, and aligned relationships. Through her coaching programs, Diana helps women embody their fullest expression, break free from limiting cycles, and create love that feels safe, fulfilling, and deeply sacred. Are you ready to dive into this episode? Me too. Let's dive in.
Good morning.
Good morning. How are you?
Good morning.
Yay. I'm good. How are you ladies doing?
Very good.
Doing very good.
Awesome. Well, I'm so excited. Today we have on our podcast Diana, and her and I actually connected through a mutual past coworker and friend of ours. He had reached out and said, you should really connect with Diana. I think you guys have a lot of things in common, maybe some similar life journey things. You two would probably really hit it off. So I think we connected and was like, let's go get some coffee. And I think time just flew by, and man, we had a lot to talk about.
Oh yeah.
So and thank you for being on the podcast today. Super appreciate you taking time out to chat with us.
Yes, it's my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Yes. So, obviously, like we've said, on our podcast, we like to just kind of talk about journeys and things that we go through. So if you can share a little bit about your journey.
Oh, goodness, where should I begin? What part intrigues you the most? Because I could start from childhood. There's plenty of content there.
Ooh, I love the childhood stuff, so you could start there.
We talk a lot about the childhood stuff in the inner child.
Okay, well, I guess I could do a brief explanation of where I come from. So my family immigrated here from Russia, moved here right before I was born. So I was their first child born in the States. And they are very, very conservative Russian Baptists. I like to compare them to the Westboro Baptist Church because that's the closest comparison I found. So very, very conservative upbringing, and that just a lot of rules, a lot of growing up with shame already instilled in you. And plus, not to mention the abuse that was happening in the home. So that was my entire childhood. And so once I turned 18, I was like, sayonara, goodbye. Ran as fast as I could, away from the home. And I moved to Kansas. My family's from California. Mm-hmm. And moved here not long after I met my now husband at the mall.
I love that.
Yes.
Yeah, he was selling one of those little negative ion bracelets that were all the rage back then, that were supposed to help you with headaches and your balance and so many other things.
I remember those. Mm-hmm. Which one did you buy? Do you remember?
I think it was black, but I didn't even care. I just thought he was really cute. So I took his number, which is the most bold thing I had ever done at 19 or 18. How old was I? Doesn't matter. And that began my journey with our relationship. With all of the trauma that I had gone through in my childhood and all the things that I believed about love, which were all so skewed, not just because of the church, not just because of my parents' horribly toxic marriage, but also that how my parents were with me and that abuse that was happening in the home. So everything I knew about what love should be was connected to some kind of toxicity. So I latched on to him because he showed me just this much attention. I was like, oh, this is nice. I'm not going to let this go. And talking about attachments, I was one of the more complex types, the fearful avoidant, and which is like a mix of the anxious and the avoidance. And he's just mostly avoidant. So it was a lot of me chasing and him being like, ooh, that's too much. So that just like solidified my feelings of like, nobody wants me, nobody loves me. Yeah, a lot of chasing and not feeling worthy of my, like, in my own self and what I can bring to the table. But shortly after we got pregnant, and we were stuck in a horrible cycle of like I mentioned, the chasing, but it would be like I would also run away expecting him to chase me, or like wanting him to chase me, and he wouldn't. So I'd break up with him, and then I'd want him to chase me, and he wouldn't. And then I'd come right back and be like, okay, we could try this again. And it just kept happening. So when I got pregnant, that was actually one of the times that we had broken up. And then when I told him that I was pregnant, he said, well, we need to get married now. And I was like, no. What do you mean?
And you guys were broken up at that time?
Yes.
Right. So then, okay. So that,
when I found out I was pregnant, we were broken up, and he's like, in our broken upness, he's telling me, no, we need to get married, because he's freaked out about what his family is going to think about, you know, having a child out of wedlock. I didn't even care at that point. I was like, my family knew. I was the black sheep already.
They are very traditional on the way, you know, like the culture is very strong. So definitely something that he must have freaked out about it. So now he's like, you are linked to me.
Yep. And so I resisted at first, and I was like, okay, fine. And that didn't help me feel better about our relationship, because now I'm like, okay, we got married, but why? Why did we get married? We got married because I got pregnant, not because you loved me. So it didn't help the way I felt like in our relationship. And again, tied back to my worthiness.
Yeah.
Like right around the time that Adam was born, well, I had postpartum depression. That was just like horrible, and it unlocked the Pandora's box of all the trauma that I had gone through and suppressed. So everything came bubbling out. And sorry, I'm like very expressive with my hands.
No, that's good. Perfect.
Yeah, and then with the depression, I just said fuck you to everything. Sorry, excuse my French.
You're good.
All forms of spirituality were just like gone to me. I became fully an atheist. I was like, there's nothing out there, because if there was, why the hell would there be like this amount of hell that I'm living through? Like, that doesn't make sense. So I rejected everything, and I lived in that just like really, really dark place for a solid 5 years.
Wow. That's a long time.
Yeah, and it's like, at first I thought it was just postpartum, but then I realized, no, it's not just postpartum. It's like decades of trauma that have now bubbled up to the surface, and I had zero capability of handling with like any of it.
Right.
Like,
how did you cope during those 5 years? Because, yeah, what were your survival mechanisms, your protection during that time? Because you survived in some way, right?
I did.
You went through this experience, and at the end of the 5 years, were you aware about it? Or what were your coping mechanisms during that time?
Many unhealthy ones. Lots of drinking, lots of drug use. I basically was a club rat. Like, I lived in the club. Like 4 days out of the week I was in the club, and or chasing drugs from somebody and ending up in random houses. And so Omar and I separated like a year into our marriage because I was like, I'm not happy. I don't feel like you even like really care about me, like truly, deeply. And I asked for an open marriage initially, and he was like, yeah, that's not going to work. Because I didn't want to let him go fully, because he still was like my savior. Like, I put him up on this pedestal. He saved me from my family. He saved me from so many things. I put him here, and I was like, I'm never letting you go. Like, I don't feel like you love me, but I'm still not letting you go. So we were separated, and yeah, I was just like a club rat. I ran all around town with like random people that I didn't know, put myself in so many unsafe situations, and kept on reliving the trauma that I had experienced in childhood. Like, it just kept happening. And I was like, and that solidified my belief in like, there's nothing out there, because why does this keep happening? Like, this is demented. If there was some kind of like large force out there that like planned things out or whatever, like, this is messed up. So, so yeah,
in some way there is. It's like, hey, look at your pattern. Yeah. Like,
exactly. Like, I can see that now, but back then it could not compute. Like, no. So that continued for, I mean, I think I started like clubbing when Adam was like, my son, sorry, like 3 or 4, right up until he was 7. So like right in like kindergarten time. And I had this moment where I came home after an entire weekend of being gone. And my husband, I was in the bathroom like vomiting violently. And my husband walked in and he said, this cannot continue. You have a child. And at this point, it's getting to the point where this is unhealthy for our kid. And I can't have that. So either get your shit together or we're leaving. And I was like, wow. It had gotten to that point. Like, that was an ugly thing for me to look at with myself. And so after a day of being angry at him for giving me this ultimatum, the next day I was like, okay, but he's right though. This can't continue. I can't keep running from myself. I can't keep running from my pain. It doesn't even work trying to numb it out in all of these different ways. It just keeps coming back and more intense each time, because the more you keep trying to suppress something, the louder it gets. It doesn't just go away. It just gets louder. And I was like, okay, time to fix this. So I actually took therapy seriously. And I found out about EMDR, and was like, I have so much trauma that like all of this regular talk therapy isn't working. Let's like try to find something different. So I found EMDR, and the lady that I was working with did not do a very good job doing EMDR, because most of our sessions she spent talking about herself. But the one good thing that she give me.
Could you just explain what is EMDR for our listeners, just to make sure everyone knows?
EMDR is a form of therapy that's specifically geared towards people who have experienced like a lot of trauma. It stands for eye movement desensitization, and the R, I can't remember what it stands for. But basically it's the process looks like they have you remember a moment that was traumatic for you, and they have your eyes move from side to side. So it's bilateral stimulation, and what happens is the trauma is able to move from one side of your brain to the other side of the brain to be truly like processed, because it's stuck in this left brain, and that's it can't be fully processed there. So it has to be moved over to the other side so the processing can start happening and you can start to release it. So that's what was supposed to happen, but she wasn't very good at it. But she did refer me, and I'm thankful I met her, because she referred me to a psychologist. Her name is Dr. Sasha Hamdani. She's fucking fabulous. She's on Instagram. She's been in the White House. She's like phenomenal. And she told me I had been misdiagnosed so many times, and she told me, no, like, you have CPTSD. Like, considering your childhood and everything that happened, you have CPTSD, and I would recommend TMS therapy, which is another very, what is it called? So many letters here. Anyway. TMS is a transcranial magnetic stimulation, and it's a form of therapy where they place a big, like, badass magnet on your brain after, like, mapping it out. So they ask you questions, and they see what, like, you're connected to, like, this MRI type thing on your head where they can see the waves and the stuff happening in your brain. And then they ask you questions, and they can see what part of your brain is, like, not responding. So then they choose that as, like, the point, and they put the magnet there, and they stimulate that part of your brain. And this is like a 3-month process. So I went from horribly depressed, didn't want to live, and actively tried to remedy that, to, oh my gosh, I can't even remember why I felt that way. And that's when therapy started actually working for me. Like, I was able to actually talk about these things in a way that wasn't horribly skewed in my brain. Like, I couldn't see the positive of anything. Everything was like in just a dark cloud for me. And like, all this cognitive behavioral therapy stuff that I was being sent to was not working, because you can't think your way out of that stuff. You can't think your way out of horrible trauma. It's not how it works. And this is what I discovered later after I did like a year of therapy, and I was like, okay, starting to feel like an actual human being again. And then I started dabbling in some of that witchy stuff, because I was like, oh, this is cute. It's very aesthetic. It was like coming back up. I was like, that I should do some spells, but I didn't believe in any of like the energetics or stuff. I was like, I just wanted like a new hobby. So I started dabbling with it, and I was like, actually, maybe there is something here. And then I started like going in further, and I was like, ooh, actually, like, this stuff does make sense. And I started going further and further in. And then I discovered shadow work. And I was like, oh, this is like therapy, but you do it to yourself. That's awesome. Like, I can ask myself the questions I know I need to be asked.
Wow, that's really powerful.
Yeah. So that took me down a whole rabbit hole. And then I discovered attachment theory. And that took me down a whole new rabbit hole. And I discovered so many rabbit holes in that time. And I figured out, like, I'm a researcher at heart. And I have ADHD, so I will not quit until I've figured out why things work the way they do. And so I discovered how to heal myself. And it was a process, like 3 years of me just like soaking in all this knowledge, like reading all these books and like trying it on myself. And now here we are.
Wow. Oh, wow. First of all, thank you for sharing all of that and being vulnerable. Wow, that's an incredible story. And I love what you just said in that last part just made me think of that saying that like nobody's coming to save you. You know what I mean? It's like that tough truth that we get to, nurture ourselves and kind of save ourselves and do all of that healing and start that. So I love that, when you got to that pivot point, when your husband was like, this can't go on, you allowed yourself to feel that anger. And then it was like, then it sunk in like, okay, maybe he's right. And then you started that. So beautiful. But But one of the things I wanted to go back to was the attachment theory. So that is something that I would love for you to share with us about, like, how you found it and like what kind of connections you made with it and how it helped your healing.
So one of my friends at the, like I had just met her, she's my best friend now. She mentioned it in passing as something that she, her therapist told her about. And she's like, this is so fascinating. Like, I want to give you this book about it, but I'm not done reading it. So I'll just tell you what it is. And you go look into it because it's like going to blow your mind. And so I did a simple Google search. I was like, what the heck is this stuff? Like, what? So that's how it started, with the Google search. And then I started listening to podcasts about it and reading articles. And then I was like, okay, maybe I should invest in a book. And so I invested in a book and I started reading about it. And I was like, wow, this makes so much sense. And the fact that it's not my fault, it's not a problem with me and who I am as a person. It's just how I was raised. Like, it's okay. Attachment theory is all about how you attached to your caregivers and how they cared for you in your formative time. Like, the first year is the most important, and then it's like, then up until 7, things keep happening, but not as much. But that first year, so let's say you were left in your crib to cry it out. You most likely have an anxious attachment type because you feel like you have to perform to get attention. And that attention and that care that you should have gotten is not reliable. So now you're anxious all the time when it comes to relationships you have. And this can show up, it mostly shows up in like romantic relationships because that's the closest person you have to you. But it can show up in friendships. It can show up in your work life. It can show up in every single relationship you have. And it can continue on with your parents as well and your siblings. So,
can you share the different attachment styles that exist?
So there's 3 like main ones. I know there's others, but I don't know what they're called. The 3 main ones, and it's like a spectrum as well. You may not identify fully with one. You can kind of like, but you have like one main one. So there is the anxious attachment type, there is the avoidant attachment type, and then there is the complex one, which is fearful avoidant, and that's a blend of the 2. And you can kind of be more in one than the other, I guess.
How do you pinpoint the one you are, especially since, it's not black and white, like you kind of have all the grays areas in between. So how do you pinpoint your main one, and how do you also sort where sometimes in this situation it could be more anxious and sometimes in this situation it could be more fearful?
So it just goes off of how you respond the most to triggers. And if you find that it's like a 50-50 split or like a 60-40 or somewhere right in the middle, then you're most likely a fearful avoidant. And that stems from lots of trauma in the childhood. So avoidant attachment type is, those are the people who you struggle to feel close to because they have walls built up. They don't trust closeness. For them, that's unsafe. And that's what I was working with my husband. He's like, nope, you're right here. Even though he did care. And like every time we broke up, he cried about it. But he couldn't express that to me. He told me years later that he cried every time we broke up. I never saw that. He wasn't able to show his emotions, be vulnerable in any way, because for him, that was unsafe. So that's avoidant attachment type. Anxious, you're like, please love me, please love me, please love me, please love me. Do you love me? Am I annoying you? Like, that's anxious attachment. And then fearful avoidant is more like, I hate you, don't leave me type of energy, where you push them away, but then you want them to come back. And it's like this Yeah, same.
That's
You guys are that. I'm the anxious, and I realize that, like, looking at past relationships, like, oh my gosh. And I think maybe that's, did it ever come up for you where you'd be, in a fight or something and you're like, what am I doing right now? If you were able to take a step back, because I remember being like, what is this? Why can't I just be like, I'm good, see you later? But like you described, I was like, do you love me? Oh my God. And am I okay? Am I doing this right? Like, ugh.
Yeah. Yeah, the self-awareness that like pops up, I feel like that's the worst part. Like that's the beginning part, but I feel like it's the worst because you haven't gotten to the point where you can stop it from happening, but now you're aware of it and you're just watching yourself do this crazy shit. And you're like, what am I doing?
Yes.
That's the worst part.
So so you're learning all of this, having all this self-awareness. What was it like bringing that up to your husband? Or did you wait a while? Or how did that maybe just come about? Maybe it wasn't planned.
I'm a very loud person and I share a lot and I can't help it. But I told him everything as soon as I was learning it. I was like, and then I found out this and then I found out about this and like maybe you're this one and we should look this up.
How
and
did
then I
he
was like, we
react?
should go to therapy. Oh, he didn't like it. No,
Like,
because
avoidance.
yeah, he's like, that sounds like bullshit to me. And then I was like, we should go to therapy. He's like, no. And then I kept bringing it up, and I was like, no, but I really don't like how we interact with each other, and I don't like how the both of us are like. Now I'm like super aware of our issues, and I'm like, but we can fix them. So I was like, no, we can't just like keep going the way we're going. Like that's not. No, it's not good. It's not good for either of us. Like you don't feel good when I spin out and like do all this crazy stuff, and I'm sure it doesn't feel good to you that you're unable to share with me. So I kept pushing it, and I'm very good at pushing. And I got him to agree to one session. I was like, just one. Just come with me once, and if you don't like it, then you can say at least you tried. So we went, and that was the first time I actually heard him. Like he would tell me things before, and because I'm so loud, but my feelings matter more, and you don't hear me, and you don't listen to me, and you don't love me, and blah 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 blah. I never heard his side, and so our first time in therapy, I was told to basically shut the fuck up and let him speak, and he expressed himself, which was like, what? And I heard him and I was like, wow. So like, I really am the problem. I mean, we were both the problem, but I didn't realize how much I was the problem until that moment. So he's like, I like this. Like, she's finally put in her place. Like, in a good way.
Someone's
he felt
helping
like
me.
he was finally like somebody's backing him up, and like he's not this horrible person that I've painted him to be. Like, so that was good for the both of us, and it was especially good for him because he's like, okay, so I can express myself, and it can be like this safe place, and it felt more safe to him in therapy because there's this person that's telling me to stop when I like go off on these things. I'm like, but. So we continued therapy, and not even that many sessions, honestly. I think we did like maximum 10, and that was enough because like with all the work that I was doing on myself and all the learning that I was doing and bringing into our relationship, all we needed in therapy was to learn how to communicate with each other and learn how to like, okay, stop, let's just take a breath here, let's step back for a minute and like just learn those communication skills, and it just transformed everything. We went from just like I couldn't share any of my needs without it becoming this like explosive fight, and now we're on the brink of divorce. And he couldn't share anything at all, so that was worse for him.
Wow, that sounds so powerful. Like, to me, on the outside, it sounds like you both are hurting in a way, and you want that love and connection, but it's like, how do you express your needs, and how, like, you're trying to express your needs and it's difficult to hear the other person. You know, it's like both people being like, I need this, I need this. So how beautiful that, I love that you both said yes, like, we're not communicating the way we want to or that we should, so let's try something different, something we haven't done before. And to have that impact on the first session, like where you're like, wow. And then, so how are things now?
Oh, like when we just got together, like people have their honeymoon phase in relationships. We never had that because it was immediately like push-pull. Like it was just like that. We're in a honeymoon phase now.
Aww.
Like it's, we finally figured out how to love each other. And also appreciate the way in which the other loves. And so it's beautiful. Like, what we've created and like what it came from. Like every time I think about it, I'm like, wow, what did we make?
It's amazing. I'm
amazing.
So happy for you. And I mean, it's so, you know, the work that we are doing with ourselves, I think, is so powerful. And that's, you know, you are the proof that you can transform, and you transform yourself, but you also transform your relationship with your husband. And the fact that he was open to go in therapy at least one time and try, he wanted to get help as well. So that's, congratulations to both of you. That's amazing.
Thank you.
I'm very curious. So you were able to heal, you know, the relationship with your husband. Were you able to improve or heal the relationships with your family since you had all this trauma as a child?
Yes. So most of the healing began to happen right after my dad died. And I think that kind of like shook our family, that loss. And also, just because he was the source of most of the trauma, I think when I left the house, like, I feel like, sorry, trying to like wrap my head around this. Okay. Every single kid that my parents had, once they turned 18, they were like, gone, out of the house. And so we kind of like all ended up everywhere, and we weren't close with each other. So when he died, I felt like we were given permission to like reconnect again, in a weird way. And I don't know why I said permission, but it felt like that. Like it felt more safe to be with each other now. And then shortly after, my brother died, and then my brother-in-law died. So it was 3 deaths in 3 years. And I think my family learned the importance of like, okay, we actually do need to stick together, and we do need to try and have relationships with each other. And so for me, like, I felt that in my soul. I was like, there's a reason I was born into this family. I chose this family. I chose my parents for whatever reason. I mean, I know the reasons now. So I could teach people how to deal with this shit. So I started to talk to my mom, and she was very, very passive like when I was growing up. She was more, I think, avoidant. She didn't express a lot of emotion. I didn't hear a lot of like I love yous from her. Didn't get like a lot of affection. Like she wouldn't really hug us much, because I mean the household that she was living in was so traumatic for her as well that she just like completely withdrew. So I started to reconnect with her first, and I started sharing with her my traumas and how they affected me. And at first she was resistant, and then I think spirit just guided her in a way that was like, okay, you need to hear her out. And she started seeing things like from her church, because she's still Christian. She started seeing things like in her church there would be like a sermon given on a topic that made her think of me and what I had said. And she started opening up to like those discussions. And I remember one time she was visiting here, and her and I went on a walk that lasted for 3 hours. And it was just me sharing how those traumatic things in childhood, how they affected me, and why I was the way that I was, and why I did the things that I did. And that was the first time that she apologized to me for her hand in it. And it was so beautiful, and I'm gonna cry because I felt like I got my mom, not even back, because I didn't feel like I ever had her, but I felt like I had a mom, and that was really beautiful. So now our relationship is a lot closer. I wouldn't say it's like most families, or not even most, because everybody has their issues. But I don't know. There's some parents who are like this with their children. We're not like that. But we have found this mutual respect for each other. Like I said, she is still in the church. And the fact that she's able to accept me as I am, being out of the church, is massive, and would not have been a thing 10 years ago. So there's that mutual respect, and she shared her story with me and her own traumas when she was growing up, and what it was like for her and how that affected her. So I was able to see her not just as my mom and as this person who didn't protect me the way I needed to be protected as a child, to this person who also had her share of traumas, and she wasn't given the tools or taught how to process that either. And so just as I went through, the first 5 years of Adam's life were not fucking pretty, and I'm sure caused a lot of issues. She had the same. Granted, hers didn't look as societally unacceptable, but was equally damaging for her children. So seeing her as a human being who also experienced her own traumas and didn't have the tools to process that and heal it on her own, was healing in itself for me too.
I love that, and I'm sure she must have healed as well.
Yeah.
Like a big chunk of her life. So, and I just wanted to share, I think you're an incredible woman and mother. You went through a lot, and you realized at some point that you needed to heal. And the healing that you did and you are still doing, because it's a journey.
Yes.
It's healing, yourself, but everyone around you, including your son.
Yes.
And you will lead by example. So even though his first years of his life may have been more chaotic than you would have hoped for, you will show that even within the chaos, you are able to take steps and do the healing and, have the life that you want to. So I really want to acknowledge that.
Thank you. I used to have so much shame around the parenting aspect of it and just what my son went through, which for the most part was hidden from him. He didn't see a lot of the ugly. But as we know, children are intuitive as fuck, and they can feel it, and they sense the energy in the home regardless of if they're seeing it with their eyes. So that effect still happened. And I used to have a lot of shame around that. And then I recognized, just as I did with myself, that I chose my family and I chose my hardships. So did my son. And I was able to, through that realization, I was able to release the shame and take the opportunity to show him how to heal those wounds. So I have been very open with him about my struggles. Mommy's crying. I'm not going to hide in my room. I'm going to let him see me cry, and I'm going to explain to him that it's okay to cry, and it's okay to process your feelings, and it's okay to feel your feelings. And yes, you tell somebody when you're upset, and you don't hold it inside of you and carry it. You express yourself. So that's been another beautiful thing that has come from my healing is, like you said, I'm showing my son how to do it too.
How old is he now?
He's 10.
Oh.
It's so beautiful. Like Steph was saying, I want to piggyback on that because as you were sharing about this kind of new relationship that's formed with your mother, it just feels like when you start to heal, it just ripples out. Not that that's your intention, but it just, maybe you're that way shower for other people, that permission, if you will, kind of coming back to that word where it's like, okay, Diana's doing this for her, and she's like, I'm sure to them, you know, you're glowing and everything, and they're like, it's okay for me to say, hey, I went through some shit, and it wasn't fun, and I'm sorry for the things that maybe I did or didn't do, and I can be better now. I can try now. And I love that you and your mom, instead of writing each other off and saying that's just how it is, you like have this beautiful connection, like we can start now.
Mm-hmm.
And there's no expectations of what it looks like. We're just going to come together and create something new. So I absolutely love that because I think the mother wound is a big thing that some of us choose, you know, in our soul's lessons. Like, I don't, you know, it's hard for us now to be like, why did I sign up for this lesson? Like, this one really hurts, you know, especially, I don't know if you guys can relate, but as a woman longing for that connection with your mother, and sometimes when you feel like everyone else has that, but that plays a role too.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. Can relate.
We hear about daddy issues so much when it comes to women, but no, like the whole mother thing. I'm so happy it's now starting to like gain traction and like attention, because our mothers are our like main caregiver, and most of the wounds that we have come from our mother. Mm-hmm. So it's like it like affects you on such a deeper level than those daddy issues would. So I'm
100%.
Yeah,
100%. And to piggyback on what you said, so the mother is the most important caregiver, and the energy, like they don't have to speak, they don't have to, you know, they could tell you every day, I love you, but if the energy is not there, like you're not gonna feel the love.
Mm-hmm.
So the mother wound that it can create is so deep.
So deep. Yeah.
And you mentioned, we are coming to the end, however, I just want to touch on something you mentioned, that now you help others. So how did you bring all this healing into your present day, and you are able to help other women that are going through struggles as well?
Yes, so like 2 years ago, I started feeling the pull to be a healer. And I wasn't really sure what that looked like, and it took me 2 years to figure it out. At first, I started dabbling in hypnosis, like quantum healing hypnosis, because I thought understanding our past lives and speaking to our higher selves was very important. So that's where my journey began as a healer, was with that. And then I added Reiki to my tool belt, and then I started looking into somatics, and I was like, this is fascinating. And I kept hearing, like, you got to feel it to heal it. You got to feel it. Yeah, but what does that mean, and what does that look like? So, like, somatics just, like, opened a whole new thing for me. And through somatics, actually, I was able to release so much stored trauma in my body. Like, I had done all this other stuff, but nothing affected me as much as somatic work. Like, I remember my first rage release.
Oh, we love those.
Yes.
Wow.
Yep.
There was so much rage in there, and carrying that, like, how toxic is that to your body? like not just your energy, because that emanates, but your body carries it. And I was struggling with so much chronic pain, like just constant back pain. I thought I had fibromyalgia, but the doctors didn't know what it was. And they're like, it's just, what do they call it? Psychosomatic pain. Like, it's all in your head. I'm like, thanks. But I mean, it was hard for me to hear at the time, but it was all in my head. And by head, I mean my energy field. I was carrying it, and it was stored in my body. So I was able to release that. And then somebody told me I should be a therapist. Well, I've been hearing that for like my entire life, that I should be a therapist. And I'm like, I don't want to do that. Like, all this clinical stuff does not interest me. I mean, like, I love the science of it, but only to the point that it explains all the energetic stuff that we hear. And it like legitimizes it. Like, it's not woo-woo. It's backed by science. It's just called something different. And then I discovered coaching, and I was like, well, that's kind of like a therapist, and I could walk people through what I've been through, and I can help somebody who's just 2 steps behind me. And I don't have to have like all of these like fancy certificates that cost $10,000 to get. And I could just work from my own experience and like what I know I have in me to help other women heal. So I started my coaching business, and I created a program called Healing Her, where I help women through a blend of, first we figure out what attachment style you have. And then we do different forms of somatic healing, quantum healing, and nervous system healing to heal you on a holistic level, so that you can experience true connection in your relationships. Because it's so hard to like just let love exist with all this noise in your head and all this pain that you're carrying in your body. So that's my work. That's what I've created out of all the pain.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Well, I hope that you're going to help as many women as possible.
I hope so too. It's needed.
Yes. And was there a way that they can connect with you, or was there something that you wanted to share?
Yes. So you can find me on Instagram. I share a lot of tips at dianafjer.coach. And I also started a podcast because I recognize that a lot of these topics are a little bit like, there's a lot to learn. So I figured I'd break it down in digestible ways, and short form content, you can't do that. So I started a podcast, and I actually am working on a series right now, diving into each attachment type, and talking about where it came from, how it formed, how it affects your relationships, and how to heal it. So I like give tools to people that they can use to start healing their attachment wounds. And I've also created a quiz where you can find out your own attachment type, and it comes with a healing guide in a more condensed format. So if you don't want to listen to an hour of podcast stuff and me blathering on, you can have it in this tiny little guide and a quiz.
Thank you so much. We're going to add those information in the show notes so everyone can reach out to you and take the free quiz and listen to your podcast for sure.
Yes, thank you.
Thank
you so much for joining. And
thank you for sharing your story.
Thank you for listening.
I love the conversation. It's so powerful. So thank you.
Thank you for having me. I really enjoyed talking with you both.
Yes.
Bye, everyone.
Goodbye.
Bye. Thank you for joining us on this journey of self-discovery and spiritual awakening. We hope the stories and insights we've shared today have inspired you to embrace your abundant soul and live your life with more presence, purpose, and passion.
Remember, the path to awakening is unique for each of us, but we're all connected by our yearning for deeper meaning and authenticity. So keep an open heart and mind, and trust that the universe will guide you exactly where you need to go.
This has been the Abundant Soul Podcast. See you next Sunday as we continue to explore the depths of spiritual awakening and personal growth.